Hi, David here, and welcome back to the channel. So far, in the messages that make up Series 1 of the videos, we've been looking at mediumship and life in spirit through the automatic writings of the early 20th century medium James Padgett. That will continue with the Wednesday videos, but I mentioned last time that today we will start a new series of videos. In the Padgett messages that we've already looked at, there are repeated statements as to the importance of divine love, that this is something different from human love, and to the difference it makes to the mortal soul when it is touched by that love. We've also already seen that James received a message from a communicator identifying himself as Jesus, but that James and his friend, Dr. Leslie Stone, who often sat with him for the writing of the messages, were so convinced that this must just be someone in spirit playing a trick on them, that James destroyed that first message, I think by throwing it on the fire and burning it. I mentioned in that earlier video that this did, nevertheless, present James with a challenge. Does he persevere with the writing, and can he trust the content of the messages that are written? He is driven to a large extent by his desire to hear from his wife Helen and other family members, but even their messages, as we have seen, do contain mention both of divine love and of James as having been selected to do the work of receiving messages from Jesus and other prominent New Testament figures. Messages that will correct the misunderstandings and false teachings that have obscured our understanding of God and Spirit, and which will explain the teaching of divine love. So even in the messages from Helen and his other family members, James is being asked to accept something that at first seems to him to be unlikely, if not impossible. But they were insistent that Padgett had been selected for the purpose of delivering these messages to the world, as we saw in video 114. I'll include a link to that video at the end of this one and in the video description. The messages discussed in that video were some equally insistent ones from people whose names are preserved in the New Testament as disciples of Jesus, who have also come forward to make use of James through his automatic writing. James started his automatic writing in mid-1914. That first attempt by the Spirit identifying himself as Jesus, which was discarded by James, was soon followed by further messages, and we're going to look at one that was delivered on September 28, 1914. I am here, Jesus. You are my true brother, and will soon have the love of our Father in your heart. Do not be discouraged or cast down, for the Holy Spirit will soon fill your heart with the love of the Father, and then you will be most happy and full of light and power to help yourself and fellow men. So immediately we're into mention of divine love, the love of God, the love of the Father, as something that can be present in Padgett or in his heart. The Holy Spirit is mentioned not as a general reference to spirit, but as something that performs the function of filling the heart with God's love. The message continues, go to your Father for his help. Go in prayer, firmly believing, and you soon will feel his love in your heart. My teachings, I know, you will receive in the course of time, and you will then see that your understanding will be greatly enlarged, so that you will know that I am the Father's Son, as I explained it to you a few nights ago. you can and will receive the Father's love, so that you will not need to go through the expiation in the spirit world. Now that's interesting. Receiving God's love while living as a mortal upon the earth could mean that Padgett will not need to go through the usual process of expiation, progressing by answering for what he has done when he passes to spirit. So is this some kind of shortcut? We'll see. Jesus also confirms that he is the Father's Son, but that God is also Padgett's Father. So is this unwinding the traditional Christian belief in Jesus as conceived by the Holy Spirit, and therefore God's only begotten Son? Jesus continues, I was not conceived by the Holy Spirit, as is taught by the preachers and teachers who are now leading mankind in the doctrines of the churches. I was born as you were born, and my earthly father was Joseph. Well, that's definitely not what the Christian churches have taught down the centuries, but perhaps no great surprise. So is there anything in Jesus' nature that marked him out as different? He continues, I was conceived by God's Spirit in the sense that I was born free from sin and error, while all other human beings were born in sin and error. I never was a human being so far as my spiritual existence is concerned, as I was always free from sin and error, but I had all the feelings and longings of a human being, which were not of sin. Now, we've already seen that Padgett's spirit communicators have no time for the doctrine of original sin, or the idea that there is something inherently sinful about human beings. Yes, we do many things that are not in harmony with the universe, but this is through the inappropriate exercise of our free will, motivated by greed, fear, or just getting things wrong through simple ignorance, knowing no better. These are all things we can do something about if we feel strongly enough about it. So we might live in a state of sin or inharmony because our thoughts are shaped, conditioned by the kind of world we have created, and this is passed down the generations. What Jesus is saying here is that he was shaped or conceived directly by God's Spirit, rather than by the spirit of the time and place he was born into. Something was done to protect him from the usual influences of this world, so that his connection to spirit was not lost or overwritten. So although he was a human being, given that he talks about other human beings from himself, he was able to live in this world while also living a spiritual existence. And this kept him in a state of harmony, free from sin and error, as he puts it. Jesus continues, my love was human as well as spiritual, and I was subject to all the feelings of sympathy and love that any other human being was. Do not understand that I was with desires and longings for the pleasures of the world, which the human passions created. I was not, only I was capable of deep feeling, and could feel and know the suffering and distress of humanity. At this point, James Padgett seems to have asked Jesus if he plans to correct or amplify what is known of his teachings. He replies, yes, I will, and you will learn that many errors were written by the writers of the Bible. I will show you that the many alleged sayings of mine were not said by me, or did not express my teachings of the truth. As we've seen, James also had a passing interest in the teachings of Mary Baker Eddy, the founder of Christian Science, particularly in her teaching that messages from spirits are not possible. So he seems to have asked whether there is anything to her teachings, only to be told her teachings of Christian Science do not express the true meaning of truth and love as I taught them. She is in error as to the ideas that God is a spirit only, a spirit of mind. He is a spirit of everything that belongs to his being. He is not only mind, but heart, soul, and love. You are too weak to write more. You have my blessing, and also that of the Holy Spirit. Jesus the Christ. So a fairly brief message, which probably feels longer because I've been commenting on it, but it's clear that conditions are not quite right on this occasion for any extended communication. It's interesting that Jesus signs off as Jesus the Christ. As I'm sure some of you will know, Christ comes from the Greek Christos, which means anointed. We'll get to what he means by that, but it occurs to me that having read all the Padgett messages through a couple of times, I can't often recall, if at all, Jesus calling himself a Christian, although he does refer to what he calls the Christ principle. Things to come. By December 1914, writing the messages has become part of James's regular habit, and despite his lingering doubts, he draws great comfort and support from the messages that he is receiving. So he perseveres, as do those in spirit who wish to communicate through him. The next message we're going to look at was delivered on December 17, 1914. As you will see, it is again clear that James pauses at the end of the first paragraph, looks over what has just been written, and questions his communicator, tests him to see what he says in response. The message begins, "I am here, Jesus. I have come to write to you my first message, but you are too weak to take it. I will come again when you are stronger. You are not in a condition for me to tell you of what I have to write, because you are worried too much by what you think of your earthly affairs. I want you to let these things pass from you entirely, as I cannot give you the thoughts that I desire to write, until you are wholly free from your earth cares. Be more faithful, and you will be more in condition to do as I desire. I will not come again until you are free from these worries, for you are not in a condition to receive what I wish to write while these worries exist." Now, obviously this isn't Jesus' first communication with James Padgett, but it becomes clear later on that he draws a distinction between routine messages and what we might call messages with a capital M, which contain some spiritual truth or knowledge or correction he wishes to convey, and which he is keen to take special care over so that his words are delivered accurately. Again, James is not in condition to do this, and he seems to ask what this might take, or whether there is anything he can do to help. The reply is that you must trust more in God. I am that Jesus, and the men you have been reading about were my disciples, and they are now enjoying the reward which their work and faith entitled them to. They are not in the heavens singing psalms or riding on clouds, as some Christians of the present and past times believe and teach, but are still working for the salvation of mortal and spirit souls. They are still with me and are doing the same kind of work as when they were on earth. At this point, James obviously has in mind the traditional image described by the disciples of Jesus sitting on the right hand of God, and he asks something that prompts the following response. They did not actually mean that, but spoke only in allegory, and meant that I was in the heavens, where they all supposed God to be. But as to my sitting on the right hand of his throne, that is not true. I am in a sphere that is of the highest and closest to the fountainhead of God's love, and am working to save humanity from their sins and to bring them in unison with God's love. I tell you that only the man who has received this love into his soul and lets it fill that soul, so that there is no room for anything that tends to defile it, can be said to have received salvation, or to be at one with the Father. It is clear from later messages that what Jesus is describing here is an actual process involving real spiritual forces. It is not simple allegory or mental belief. The place where Jesus has his home is the result of his sharing in God's love, and he points the way for other people to get there too, people like you and me. Jesus is pointing to what makes him special, God's love, and at the same time he is saying this does not of itself make him unique, because divine love is what can make other people special too. He continues, so let your faith in the one necessary attainment increase, and when you have realized it to the full, you will be very happy and in God's kingdom. That's a significant sentence. If you are going to share in God's love, there needs to be faith, meaning trust that this can happen. And when it is realized, achieved to the full, then you will be in God's kingdom, or the kingdom of heaven. So the kingdom is a state of being as much as a place, and it is not simply a general reference to spirits or to heaven, because we know everyone goes to some place in spirit. Instead, the kingdom is specifically a place you are suited to if you fully share in God's love. And Jesus says of God's love that this is the one necessary attainment. It is the only way to get to this place or state of being. Now, this is quite a lot to take in at first viewing or reading, so do take your time to reflect on what has been said, even in this short message. It's familiar to me because I have been working with and reflecting upon the Padgett messages for a good few years now, but preparing for this video has brought home to me again just how much is in them. Anyway, Jesus concludes this message by saying, I must stop writing now, for you are not in condition to write more. I will soon come again, for you will be in condition to receive me. I will love you with all my heart and let you feel that I am in close rapport with you to lead you to a greater happiness from now until you can find the greater and more extensive love of the Holy Spirit, which is with you to a large extent now, but not as fully as you need. You are very dear to me, and I will never forsake you, so rest in that assurance, and I know that you will be happier, for no man has ever been in a condition of unhappiness who has my love as you now have it. Be my own true follower, and I will be with you to the end. Your own dear teacher and friend, Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified and rose again from the dead, as you will rise and live again in the favour and love of the Father. I will not write more, but will say good night, Jesus. So a lot to take in. Just a reminder that if you prefer reading the transcript or text that I use for these videos, I do post that to my Medium account. There's a link in the video description below. The next video in this series, focusing on the teaching of divine love, will be uploaded next Sunday, when we will be looking at a message James Padgett received on Christmas Day, December 25, 1914. So I hope you'll join me for that. The next video on Wednesday will be the next in the series looking at messages received by James from friends and former colleagues who are in spirit at the time of writing. They undergo quite a variety of different experiences, and their accounts are quite fascinating. As it happens, the one we will be looking at on Wednesday also picks up on the teaching of divine love, so it ties in quite nicely with this one. In the meantime, if you've enjoyed this video, please do like and subscribe to the channel, and make sure you click on the bell icon if you want to be notified when the next video is uploaded. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon. Take care.